Alright. We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, youth baseball community. Welcome, youth coaches. Excited to be here this week. Our weekly get-together here at the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass, where we're trying to master the key important parts of youth coaching first and foremost, and then building from there. Efficiently moving from new coaches to confident, good coaches, and from good coaches to great coaches. So we can walk out on the field confident that we know what we're doing, the stuff we are going to use is going to work, and it's going to work really well. I hope you all enjoyed last week's episode and the week before, the interview with Coach Tommy Hansen, a strength and conditioning coach that specializes in training youth athletes. He's a young coach, by far the youngest person I've had on the podcast for an interview, but his message really stood out following him on X. And at the end of the day, I'm not checking his ID. I want to hear his message. I want to hear the way he thinks about strength and conditioning and youth sports. And I hope all of you enjoyed that interview. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it. That's a huge topic for youth baseball. Of course, the older coaches will have more experience and by and large are going to know more. That's what this podcast is all about. It's about using experience and really grabbing hold of that old school coaching mindset and parenting mindset and basically way of living mindset, that old school way, hard work, consistency, not a bunch of unnecessary talk, having clear established rules, expecting our players to hustle, play hard, leave the dugout cleaner than we found it, etc. But also blending that with some of the new school things that are an upgrade. Now, the key word was some of the new school things. We're not just chasing new school stuff because it's this new shiny object. It's got to add up. Speaking of which, the Dodgers overcorrected or swerved hard into the Moneyball era, and there was definitely some good stuff from that, without a doubt. And we'll talk about one of those things in just a minute. But I think many in the front offices of baseball and a lot of baseball coaches and people have embraced so much of this Moneyball, new era coaching, and they're off balance. They've discounted the old school approach, the old school experience, the wisdom that came before us for many, many, many years. In some cases, just threw it out the window, dismissed folks who have been in baseball for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. I think the way to great coaching and great baseball is through both. And that's where this podcast comes in, because I'm going to filter it from both sides. I'm not picking a side. We're going to take the best of what's new, if it's better than what's old, but not just because it's new. And we are going to double down on those tried and true things that have come before us, that the coaches in years past, over the course of baseball, youth baseball, all the way up, have shown work well, and in many cases work really well across a variety of players and teams. So, hope you enjoyed that interview with Coach Hansen. Got a couple interviews planned in the near future that I think are going to also be awesome. With that said, let's dive into today's episode. I have a tip for us coaches to lower our coaching stress levels, to be more relaxed out there on the field. And we'll dive into that in just a second. And also, I am going to give you two examples of the mindset our hitters should probably have when they get in the box. I'm going to give you two specific examples of two different players and why I recommend our hitters hit like one of these players with less than two strikes and like the other player when there are two strikes. And both hitters are still playing in the playoffs as this podcast episode goes live, so you can catch them and see what I'm talking about. So essentially, I'm going to share with you two players that are currently playing in the playoffs, and no, they're not Dodgers, and why I think a hybrid version of these two players, a combo of these two would be an ideal mindset when our hitters step into the batter's box. And our hitters can watch these guys. We should show these hitters hitting to our players, to our kids. All right, we'll dive into that. Speaking of Dodgers, man, they've overcorrected, haven't they? The Dodgers and so many other teams were pulling their pitchers in the fourth inning, the third inning, the fifth inning, even though they were dealing. They were pulling pitchers. And I tweeted back in May, like a month into the season, talking about how the Dodgers had 3 games where the starting pitcher pitched into the 7th or 8th inning, just a month into the season, when they very rarely had a pitcher make it to the 8th inning the year before, the entire year before, much less the first month of the season. And it came back to get them. One of their best pitchers, Tyler Glasnow, is out. and he was throwing 8 innings a month into the season after never pitching more than about 125 innings in a season ever. 125 innings. Nolan Ryan used to throw 125 innings in a month. Now that's an exaggeration, but you get my point. Tyler Glasnow, who I really like, had never thrown over 125 innings in a season, which is a very low number for a starting pitcher, especially one making the money he was making. And then they roll him out there a month into the season, not even a month into the season, having him throw 8 innings. And here's the kicker. He threw into the 7th and 8th inning in 2 different games the first 2 months of the season when the team was winning by 8 and 9 runs. It wasn't like it was a no-hitter they were trying to get to or anything like that, which I don't think would be a good reason to leave a guy like that out there in any case. But man, now they have a bunch of hurt arms. It goes to show you, and my point here is we can learn from this. Pitchers need to on-ramp. Pitchers need to on-ramp. You build up. And with our pitchers, our young pitchers, as we move into the spring season in the not too distant future, it's important to on-ramp pitchers. This is one of the biggest gripes I had when I coached at a certain program. They would start fall games the second week of the school year. So here I get these pitchers that would have 2 bullpens at most before the first game. And I kept telling the coach I was with, I was like, we got to get out of this league. So we need to on-ramp our pitchers. The Dodgers are paying the price now. Don't pay the price in the spring season. Now, that was kind of a bonus tip/rant. So thank you for sticking with me. Now, with that said, here's a specific tip to lower our coaching stress levels. Before the first few games of the season, I recommend you watch just 5 minutes right before you go drive to the field. Watch 5 minutes of Major League Baseball bloopers. There are tons of videos, as most of you know, on YouTube that fit into this category. There may be 1,000 hours of video showing Major League Baseball bloopers, bad plays, errors, mistakes, boneheaded moves. And I recommend, as silly as this may sound on the surface, I recommend before your first game to go watch 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, you're going to see 25, 30, maybe more bloopers, errors, mistakes, dumb mistakes that Major League Baseball players make and have made. And some of these players are going to be all-stars, some of them Hall of Famers at the highest level. And so when you go out after watching the best of the best, players from the most elite level making errors, when you watch them making these silly mistakes, dropping easy fly balls, missing easy ground balls, making throws that will be worse probably than anything you'll see in your 9-year-old game. There is video out there of players in the major league level making throws worse than the worst throws in a typical 9-year-old or even 8-year-old or 7-year-old game. Now, of course, it doesn't happen that often, but my point is when you see these compilations of bloopers and mistakes and errors made by adults playing baseball, getting paid as a job to play the game at the most elite level, when you see them all making errors, and if you can watch 5 minutes, you'll see a lot of errors, a lot of mistakes. Then when you go out to your 9-year-old game and they mess up, your expectations, our expectations are going to be calibrated more accurately. And we won't be surprised at all when our team makes a mistake or 2 or 10. One of the best things we can do for our stress levels and our anger levels, which shouldn't come into play in the youth baseball world, one of the best things we can do to curb our expectations, to calibrate them correctly, is to watch the best of the best make mistake after mistake, and it recalibrates our mindset. One of the best things we can do to stay calmer, not be surprised when our team makes mistakes, is to correctly calibrate our mindset, our paradigm, so that we know and expect mistakes to be made. I know it sounds like a cheesy thing on the surface, but trust me, if you watch 5 minutes, just 5 minutes on your phone before your first game of Major League bloopers, and 5 minutes of Major League bloopers every month before you go out, right before you go out to coach a game, and that alongside with going for a 15-minute jog before you head to the field, you do a 15-minute jog and watch 5 minutes of Major League bloopers. I guarantee you smile more out there. Your heartbeat won't increase very much. You will be calm, cool, and collected and calibrated correctly. So give it a shot. Trust me on this. That might be the best thing you can do with 20 minutes of your time on game day before going out and coaching. And there's other benefits from doing those two things like jogging too. You're going to think more clearly, your focus will be better, etc. All right, speaking of focused, got a couple hitters who are dialed in with their focus. Luis Arraez, rolling that double R can be a little problematic from time to time for a gringo here. In todo caso, in any case, I'm recommending that we get our hitters to hit like Fernando Tatis Jr. with less than 2 strikes. The mindset, the hitting approach of Fernando Tatis Jr. with less than 2 strikes. He's looking to drive the ball. He's looking to hit the ball hard into the gaps. He's looking for doubles with less than 2 strikes. And then with 2 strikes, I recommend getting our hitters to have the mindset, the approach like Luis Arraez, or Luis Arraez, if you will. I was watching these 2 hitters hit, and I'm thinking, man, Luis, he won the batting title. I think it's his 3rd year in a row winning the batting title. He's won the batting title, the batting average championship in 2 different leagues, which is very rare. Winning it 3 times in a row, very rare. But believe it or not, he actually produces fewer runs than Fernando Tatis Jr. Fernando Tatis Jr.'s weighted runs created plus was 135 this year. So 100 is average, 35% better than average, producing runs. That's the name of offense. The game of offense is not batting average, it's scoring runs. It's not stolen bases, it's not home runs, it's not walks, it's scoring runs. Now, of course, all of those contribute to that. Now, Luis is the batting champ, the so-called batting champ, but his weighted runs created plus, in other words, a stat that tells us exactly how many runs they helped their team produce, was 109. It's only 9% better than average and 25% less than Fernando Tatis Jr. Now, Fernando Tatis Jr. added 276 this year, so quite a ways down from 314 where Luis won the batting title. But he produced and he helped his team score a lot more runs. Now, here's where I think the combo works the best. I think Luis' 2-strike approach, it might be the best in the game. I think his less than 2-strike approach is not the best in the game by a long shot. I think he's leaving a lot of runs produced on the table. If you watch him, it's very clear. He hits a little defensive with less than 2 strikes. We shouldn't hit defensive with less than 2 strikes. With less than 2 strikes, the hitter calls the shots. With 2 strikes, the pitcher and the umpire call the shots. And that is huge. So we've talked about the hitting plan, the hitting approach here at length. I think these 2 hitters are perfect examples of how we should get our hitters to hit, but in 2 different counts. Fernando Tatis is a perfect hitter to watch and have our hitters try to copy his mindset, his approach, his plan, his aggressiveness level with less than 2 strikes. And Luis is a perfect example of how we want our hitters to hit with 2 strikes. We should coach up the hitting plan, the hitting approach first, and the mindset. And it starts here. And I think if you work from a young age at the hitting plan, the hitting approach, pitch selection, swing intensity, if you work from a young age with hitters and they get a ton of good reps, it's not going to be a long time before they can have the mindset. Maybe they're not going to be as big and strong and as athletic as Fernando Tatis Jr., or maybe they won't ever have that skill level, but they can have the mindset Fernando Tatis Jr. has with less than 2 strikes, and they can definitely have the mindset of Luis with 2 strikes. Watch these 2 hitters hit. Now, the problem, as I see it, is Fernando Tatis should hit more like Luis with 2 strikes, and Luis should hit more like Fernando with less than 2 strikes. The ideal combo is to have those 2 approaches, less than 2 strikes, and with 2 strikes. I wouldn't get into the different counts and stuff. That's just really complicating it unnecessarily. Just treat a 3-1 like a 2-1, a 2-0, just less than 2 strikes and 2 strikes. And those 2 hitters are perfect examples of how to hit or have the mindset our hitter should have in those 2 count situations. Now, Fernando Tatis struck out this year 96 times. Luis struck out like 18 times. So Fernando Tatis struck out like 5 times more often, but he also produced a lot more runs. But with 2 strikes, I bet if they broke down the weighted runs created plus, that key stat that runs created, weighted means they factor in a lot of different things, so it's more even. It's a more fair assessment across the league, different stadiums, different situations. So we've talked a lot about the hitting plan, hitting approach here, which I think is the number one thing we need to coach up with our hitters. And these are 2 perfect examples that are still on TV right now in exciting games to watch. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying copy Fernando Tatis with 2 strikes. I'm saying copy his mindset, his approach, his aggressiveness level with less than 2 strikes. And then copy Luis, how he hits with 2 strikes, not with less than 2 strikes. Because I think the 2 of them could work on the other side of their equation there. I think Fernando could be better with 2, and I think Luis could be better with less than 2. But nonetheless, they're great in those particular areas. They're elite in those particular 2 areas. So copy that. Also, Fernando Tatis, in an interview that I found, said he's ready for the fastball and he adjusts from there. He's ready for the fastball and he adjusts from there. He doesn't guess breaking ball. He doesn't sit on off speed. He's ready for the fastball, and then he adjusts from there. Some of you guys coach at a level there's no off speed, but that's something you could have your players prep and get ready for. Also, he said with regard to his swing, he really focuses hard on going straight to the ball from his set position, from his ready load position. He really works hard to get his bat to go straight to the ball. And you'll see some hitters dip and kind of take a longer route to the ball. So those are the two things. He's ready for the fastball and he adjusts from there and he goes straight to the ball with his hands and his bat. Now, Luis Arraez, he's big on hitting line drives. He's trying to hit line drives over the infielders' heads. He said that in an recent interview. He also says he likes to let the ball travel. That's a really good idea with 2 strikes more so than with less than 2 strikes. And if the pitch is away, he goes the other way with it, he said. If the pitch is middle, he'll drive it back up the middle. And if somebody comes inside and he has to, he'll turn and burn on it and pull it. He has that Tony Gwynn type of approach and swing and whatnot at the plate. And I think Tony Gwynn with 2 strikes is exactly who we want to copy with 2 strikes. I would not prefer hitters to copy Tony Gwynn's approach with less than 2 strikes. Sorry, I wouldn't. I'm a big Tony Gwynn fan. I lean more towards old school, but why not have the 2 different approaches? Because less than 2 strikes, the hitters call the shots. In other words, the hitter decides if they want to swing or not and how hard to swing. With 2 strikes, the pitcher and the umpire call the shots. Hey, pitcher makes a great pitch. Umpire's got a big zone. Hitters going to have to swing at pitches they don't want to swing at. They're going to have to swing a little funky, maybe not a full swing. They don't dictate the terms with 2 strikes. So, want to share that with you. 2 great hitters. Steal from Luis, his approach. Use that with your hitters. Show Luis hitting and say, hey, this is how we want to hit with 2 strikes. This is the mindset. Watch what he does. And with less than 2 strikes, Fernando Tatis, this is the kind of approach we want to have with less than 2 strikes. We want to have that mindset, that approach, that plan, that look, that feel like Fernando Tatis Jr. has. And I'd be amiss if I didn't give a big shout out to my nephew, Cyrus, who's a huge Fernando Tatis fan. So always good to see him playing well. Nothing's better than being a fan of a player when you're 11 and 12 years old and him doing really well, and he's been excelling in the playoffs. All right, next week, we're going to talk about one of the biggest barriers for youth baseball coaches and why it doesn't require any baseball knowledge to overcome it. But without pushing past this barrier, we can never be good to great coaches. So we'll talk about that next week. We'll break it down so we don't make this mistake and so we can be good and great coaches. Go over to 8020baseball.com, get that free drill design guide, the 7 steps to creating a great drill, a 21-page PDF. It's the 3rd version. It's been updated a few times. It's over there. You can get it in less than a minute. And until next week, let's take care of our health so we can be there for our families, our close friends, and so we can be at our best as coaches. You should be proud of yourself for being a coach. That's always something you can hang your hat on. Something to be very proud of, being a coach, especially a youth coach. With that said, y'all take care, and until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.